Welcome to a new episode of the Cartridge Club Prime podcast, where we discuss our game of the month with members of the Cartridge Club community. If you've played along, you can always share your own experience in the forums at cartridgeclub.org, in our community's Discord, or across social media by using the hashtag PlayAlongWithPrime. I'm Church, and I'll be one of your hosts for this episode of CC Prime. Joining me to talk about our May 2020 Game of the Month of Undertale is NintendoHodge.
Hello.
Jason of Corpse Flood Gaming.
Yo.
And MauserTV.
Hello.
Thanks for joining. Happy you guys are here. And real quick before we jump into the discussion, I'm going to share a little bit of information in the breakdown. Undertale is a role-playing game made by indie developer Toby Fox and self-published for Windows PC in September of 2015. Development was financed through a crowdfunding campaign via Kickstarter. The campaign was launched in June 2013 with a goal of $5,000. It ended in July of 2013, raising $51,000. Besides some art, the game was created entirely by Toby Fox. He wanted to develop a role-playing game that was different from the traditional design, which he often found, quote-unquote, boring to play. He set out to develop a game with interesting characters and that utilizes the medium as a storytelling device instead of having the story and gameplay abstractions be completely separate. So, I thought that was interesting because this is the second time on the club that we've covered a game developed by one person, previously being Axiom Verge. So that's pretty cool. Let's jump into our Undertale discussion here, and I kind of want to hear your guys' experience with the game, if you had experiences in the past, and curious to what version you did play, because the game is available on PC, PS4, and Nintendo Switch at this time. So let's start with Hodge.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, technically my second playthrough. I played on the Nintendo Switch, and then both times I played on the Nintendo Switch. And the cool thing about this game, and I mean, we'll talk about this more as it goes, is there's a multitude of ways you can play this game. When I originally played it, I didn't know that you can play the quote-unquote pacifist mode in this game. So when I originally played it as I was playing a traditional RPG where I needed to kill people to level up to get my experience and find new weapons and things like that. And when this became the game of the month, and I found out, hey, there's passive mode, you can play this totally different. I'm like, okay, well, this time around, I need to try that method of playthrough. And I thoroughly enjoyed both ways of doing it. In my opinion, and we'll touch on this later, I actually found the pacifist mode harder than non-pacifist.
Definitely. Mauser, I know you had some history with the game.
Yeah, I've played this. This is my third playthrough, going through all three endings: pacifist, neutral, and genocide. PC is kind of rough though, because if you do a genocide run, depending on, you get two endings you can choose from at the end of the genocide run, and depending on the ending you choose, it can actually corrupt your save and corrupt your game's config files on PC. Mm-hmm. And if you're on the Steam version, that config gets uploaded to the Steam cloud. So if you want to play another playthrough after doing the genocide ending, you have to disable Steam cloud saves. You have to rewrite your config file. You have to you have to mark the game's folders as read-only so it doesn't try to write to them. It's insane. And then finally after that, you can start a new playthrough. So I had to go through all that twice just to be able to play again.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty neat feature, especially with a game with kind of these kind of moral choices, where they won't really let you kind of fudge the system to get around your choices. But maybe we'll check on this a little bit later in discussion. Jason, what are your experiences with Undertale?
This is my first time playing through it. I played the PS4 version. And yeah, I went the true pacifist route, and I heavily did not enjoy it.
We will find out.
Short form, but yeah.
Yeah. And I've actually been harassing Jason for quite some time to play this. I actually bought him the physical copy when Fangamer first did physical copies for it.
Which makes me feel extra bad for not enjoying it. It was literally free. It was a gift from a friend, and I really tried.
Yeah.
But some aspects I really liked, but overall, I actually found it kind of annoying.
Sure.
But yeah, we'll get more into it. But that's my short form answer.
So what I've already kind of talked about, the game's development, indie game made by one person. The quote that kind of sticks out is that he set out to develop a game with interesting characters, utilizes the medium as a storytelling device instead of having the story and gameplay abstractions be completely separate. So I'd be curious, do you think Toby Fox was able to achieve this? And how would you describe Undertale for somebody who's not really familiar with it? Because there's definitely folks out there who don't really know much about Undertale community or Undertale, except for maybe some of like the community stuff that got really annoying when the game was first released. So I guess, what is Undertale?
Well, it's an RPG where you don't have to kill anybody, or you can kill everybody, or you can kill just a couple of people. But overall, it's nice to be able to take different routes in a game rather than feeling like you're kind of bottlenecked into doing one thing. So that was a bit refreshing.
I think it did a good job of not making fourth wall gags for the sake of fourth wall gags. Like they're actually woven into the actual like plot of the game itself, like using save, like the save function, the ability to save, using that as an actual plot device, where it's like, oh, Flowey used to be able to save, and now you're here, so now you can save, and just stuff like that, where it's just not for the sake of breaking the fourth wall.
I also enjoyed the aspects of it where it is an RPG, but in that sense of the battle system is totally different than what you would think of. It's almost mixing in, and one example I saw online is a bullet hell game is what the battle system is. So it's a game within the game for the battle system in a sense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was pretty interesting, very classic styled RPG. Toby Fox's history is actually, he used to do ROM hacks for Earthbound, so you can definitely see, as far as like the art style and kind of like the UI system, very, very much inspired by Earthbound.
Yes, hugely.
And I thought it was great that he changed the battle system, because a lot of people, more modern players, I would say, are kind of more turned off by that traditional turn-based system. And I think with the bullet hell aspect, even that can sort of be misleading at times with some of these encounters, because they're some of them are so random. And maybe we can talk a little bit specifically about those attacks and encounters in a little bit here. But overall, yeah, the original tagline was the friendly RPG where nobody has to die. And a lot of games will kind of give you those moral choices to an extent, but usually by the end of the game, like, sometimes it ultimately doesn't matter, or it only applies to maybe like a relationship with the character, where, yeah, the sweeping differences between the pacifist and the genocide route. Should we expand on the differences between those at all, do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the major hooks of the game.
So I've never done the genocide route myself, so you guys all have a little bit more experience with that. I'm not a monster. No, for me, the first time I played the game, I kind of knew about that aspect. So a lot of times, like with stealth games and stuff, like I know there's this kind of twist of the gameplay, and I always usually go that alternate route to try to do something a little bit different. But I mean, what is the genocide route?
So the genocide route, it's you have to literally kill every creature, every character in the game. Like, instead of playing the game normally and instead of just choosing to kill every encounter you run into along the way through the game, you have to deliberately grind each level, each random encounter over and over and over again until there's literally nobody left in that area, and then move on to the next area and do the same.
And they get to a point where enemies won't respawn anymore in like some of the random encounter areas.
Right. You'll get a random encounter notification, like you'll pop into a battle screen and it'll say, but nobody came.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah, it is. The game really makes you feel, or tries to make you feel like what you're doing is a terrible thing, especially considering most of the people you encounter aren't necessarily bad people. They're just performing a role or a duty.
Some of them are dicks.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
there are a few.
100%.
They're like, hey, I don't want to hurt you. And they're like, I don't care. I'm a dick. And you're like, I really want to hurt you, but I'm playing through pacifist right now. I think that's what took me out of it a lot. I think I would enjoy a neutral or genocide route a lot more, because there's nothing I hate more than not fighting back. I absolutely, like, especially if you die and then you got to do it again. You're like, I want to kick this guy's ass so bad. So doing the pacifist route was a different experience, but one I ultimately just kind of was just annoyed by. Random encounters were more annoying than when you played a traditional RPG where they just pop up out of nowhere. You're like, well, it's more XP. You get nothing out of not fighting anybody except for, I guess, feeling good about yourself.
Yeah.
Like 2 gold.
Right. And I mean, as it's been mentioned already, is that going pacifist makes the game significantly harder.
I wouldn't say harder than genocide, though.
No?
Nah, some of the genocide fights, like everyone talks about the final boss fight,
Yeah,
like the Megalovania and all that.
Mhm.
There's a fight against Undyne that I think is the hardest fight in the game. It uses different mechanics. You're not just doing bullet hell. It takes her shield defense mechanics and twists them around, and it's insane. It takes me like a lot of tries just to get through.
Yeah, I think that's the first barrier that I encountered where like I didn't have really much problem taking care of any of the other encounters, but this one I ended up having to backtrack a bunch and buy a bunch of healing items to make it through that fight.
Yeah, it's rough.
The Undyne pacifist one?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Did you not have much trouble with that one?
With Undyne? No, not really. I didn't really have much trouble till like the very end, which, like, you figure out the pattern. Mm-hmm. Most of them are pretty easy. The first time fighting Papyrus, I think I had a bit of trouble, and then figured him out, and that was about it. Like, most of them never ended up killing me off. I usually only carried about 2 healing items or whatever. Just whatever I picked up, I never really went out of my way to get them until like I was like, oh, I'm very clearly near the end. Then I started carrying more, but
I even found just the random, doing the pacifist mode, just the random battles. I found, okay, what answer do I need to get out of this battle properly? Okay, let's try this one. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, and I'm dead. Okay, you got to restart and go back and try something. And I died quite a bit playing through just on random enemies, or I felt I would, beat this enemy. I don't know how far up this next save point is. I need to use a healing item, and then I would run out of healing items. And I got to spend all my money on healing items now when I can, and it just kind of cycled through that. But later on, which we can talk about whenever, and I reached out to you guys just for a little guidance because I kind of got to a spot where I thought I was screwed and I wasn't going to be able to finish the game. But luckily, I was able to go back and kind of cheat the system, I guess, in a sense, to load up on some healing items, and I was able to continue on, which was great.
Yeah, I think it makes for another interesting trade-off. Is if you go like the genocide route, then you're equipping armor, you're equipping weapons, you're killing enemies and getting. I don't know if you actually do you get extra gold for killing enemies versus.
I think so. I feel
I'm
like
pretty
you
sure
do.
you do. Yeah.
Okay. But in the genocide route, you're leveling up, so you're getting more hit points and you have to buy better healing items to heal you better. Where if you play the pacifist route, essentially you don't level at all. You stay first level the entire game, and it's really handy because there's a very cheap healing item that you can actually heal twice with. So that alleviates some of that, I think. I mean, you can still equip armor and weapons, but
it just sucks with that because it's easy to use those, but when you're in the middle of a battle and you take 2 hits and you lose half your HP, and then I need to heal now and try to avoid the hits before I can do my attack, right? So it was tricky. It would be nice to have a little bit more HP, but I get it because you're not leveling, so you don't get that.
yes. So would one of you want to kind of talk a little bit more about what the battle system is? We already said it's kind of like a bullet hell, but
It depends on the enemy.
Yeah.
Honestly, a lot of it's almost like playing a different game while you're getting attacked to avoid things. Like some it's bullet hell. One feels kind of like almost like asteroids when you're fighting Undyne. I felt like when you got to turn the shield to
I can see
wherever he's attacking from, felt kind of like something like that. And the one like was it Papyrus, the one where you have to like jump over all the bones and stuff. That felt more like, I don't know, felt almost platformy in a way.
I thought that was like more like Flappy Bird.
Excite Bike. Yeah,
yes, Flappy Bird. Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I didn't play Flappy Bird, but yeah,
So for a little more clarification, if anybody's not familiar, so basically, if you know what kind of how Earthbound presents its battle system, where you see the enemy, you don't see your characters, and there'll just be an info box. Where this one, you see the enemy, and then there's literally a box, and you are a heart. That's basically your life or your hit box. And in this box, when you counter enemies, they'll have different things being sent into the box that you're avoiding or jumping or dodging. It's all over the place. There's every enemy has a unique little battle function, I guess.
Yeah, and that way it keeps it sort of, engaging, because you're like, oh, you got to learn something new. It's not just here they come, they're going to do this, and this, and I got to avoid this. But like everyone's got their own attack patterns, so that makes every enemy feel like a different enemy. It doesn't feel like just the same crap every time. So in that way, I thought it was pretty cool.
At least for dodging attacks. The other part, being on the offensive, I think was my biggest gripe with the game. Where if you're trying to do the pacifist, you're just trying to do non-lethal, where you talk your way out of damage. It's like, oh, okay, it's this guy again. Okay, I'm going to compliment your hat. Okay, you're going to say this. I'm going to compliment your hat again. All right, have a good one. We'll see you next time. And then just rinse, repeat.
Yeah, it felt like a weird conversation simulator in that way too. Where that's the part I didn't like. Like, how do I talk this guy down? It's basically all you're doing. You're talking everyone down, trying not to get in a fight.
Yeah, and how that
totally
system works. Would you want to touch on that?
Yeah, that's basically exactly what you do. There's all the different, in like every RPG, there's attack, there's, use item, there's talk or whatever it is, compliment, and you go and you can say, like, there'll be, depending on the enemy, there'll be anywhere between 2 and like 8 things you can do. You can say something, you can egg them on, you can say, oh, you're cool, or you can flirt with them, or you can ignore them, or whatever. Like, and you got to kind of look at the type of enemy and figure out, like, hey, what's going to get this person's attention? What's going to make them react the way you want? And some are just totally just, you basically, it's just trial and error. It won't have any effect on them. And then sometimes even the thing that you need to do to get their attention, you got to do a couple times before they even respond to it at all. So the first time you might use it, you'd be like, oh, that's useless. That does nothing. But I had to do it 3 times. So that's where I found it annoying, honestly.
Yeah, I can
okay,
see
what
that.
do I got to do? And I didn't want to look anything up, so I didn't. So it made it a bit more annoying. Like, okay, like how do I get this guy? It's basically, how do I make everyone fuck off? And then, just leave me alone. It was basically like being an introvert in the game. Be like, leave me alone. I don't want to fight you. Go away. I don't even want to deal with you. Get away from me. I'm literally just trying to leave. Leave me alone.
I found they got progressively harder though, because like in the beginning, like for the Snowden enemies, for example, the dogs. Okay, it's a dog. I'm gonna try to pet the dog because it's a dog, and sure enough, that's the right action to do, right? You pet the dog gets all excited. Okay, what's next? I'm gonna play with the dog, and then the dog gets all tuckered out and tired, and then you can, okay, I'm going to not kill you.
Oh, exactly. That's what I mean. Like some of them were very obvious what you're gonna do, and then some of them were like a jellyfish looking thing. You're like, I don't know, dance.
So what was
flirt
kind
with
of
it? Oh, it likes when I flirt with it. Weird.
Anyone else feel like uncomfortable with that too? Like you're supposed to be like some like 10-year-old kid. You're flirting with it.
I'm flirting with octopuses in caves.
Yeah, and actually with the act command where you can choose those actions, the first one is, I think, I can't remember exactly what it was, examine or something, and that a lot of times will give you a very strong clue on like how to respond to the enemies. Like some of them is like, they'll say, oh, he's just looking for a compliment, or
okay, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's a good
and
idea.
Earlier in the game it really doesn't seem like it amounts to much, but a lot of times that will kind of direct you what to do. And then so you talk these enemies down, and then eventually their name on the UI will turn yellow, and then you can use the mercy command, which basically ends the fight without killing them, and then you go on about your way.
That seems weird that they're the one attacking you and you're doing nothing, but you're showing them mercy. like they're begging for your mercy.
Well, it kind of ties in with that. That'll tie in more with the story and why they're doing that.
Maybe they're just that bored of the conversation.
Just like, oh my god, thanks. Oh, thank you for giving me mercy and letting me leave. What a weirdo! He flirted with me.
So along with the kind of more traditional JRPG gameplay, talking to people, usually text boxes, we got this crazy unique combat system. Did you have any particular favorite encounters? Because for me, there's a lot of them I found pretty funny, very weird. So I'm interested in any ones that kind of stood out to you, or ones that you like despised absolutely.
I found most characters annoying, but I found Papyrus kind of funny in his weird, like, adding to the weirdness of it, like saying, yeah, you're a 10-year-old kid, but he seems like almost like he has a crush on you. He acts. He just really wants a friend. He's just like, oh, and you go on that awkward date thing with him if you spare him, and that's how you unlock the cat shrine in his house on the PS4 version, at least. I don't know. I know it was exclusive to the PS4 version. I don't know if they put it in the Switch version at all, but
that is.
I found him one of the most enjoyable characters. I found a lot of the other characters kind of grated on my nerves. Undyne was pretty cool, I thought. And what's his name? The dude at the end, like the regular end before the true end.
Asgore.
Yeah, he looked pretty metal. But,
yeah, it's definitely a very silly game, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the silly kind of got lost on me. Honestly, the story didn't vibe with me really at all. Not just like I'm not fighting anybody. I didn't realize I was such a violent person until I played this game, and I was just like, I want to crush these freaking fools.
Seriously, go through the genocide ending. I've never had a game make me feel so terrible about myself than Undertale's genocide ending. Like, no joke.
Yeah, they definitely drive that home, especially. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that. So I guess for other favorite encounters, what do you guys?
I think for main characters, Sans is probably my favorite of all of them. He's got a bunch of great one-liner dad jokes, as I like to call them.
Yeah,
Pretty much throughout the whole thing. I love it.
I
feel fun.
actually knew you. I was waiting for you to say that because we're friends on Facebook, and you've got a daily like dad joke.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Oh my God, Hodge is loving this. I can tell. Like it actually made me think of you right away because I knew you were on the episode too, and I was like, he's gonna love this.
Yeah.
If he hasn't played it yet. It was pretty.
But I did appreciate the little discussion you have with Sans at the end of the neutral playthrough when you're talking with him at the cafe and things get kind of serious and he starts leveling with you a little bit. Like I really appreciated that. So he's not so much of just a jokester. Like he's got a serious side to him too as well.
Mm-hmm. And there's some of the encounters too can have like some hidden things. Like the first time you encounter one of the dog enemies, the lesser dog, it's kind of like a dog in knight armor. Not the big beefy one, but it's the first one you encounter. Yep. And that's the one that you can pet. And his head will rise up a little bit. Well, you can actually pet that dog like 30 or like 35 times. And his head, every time you pet it, keeps rising up. And eventually it goes through the top of the screen. It comes back down and goes to the bottom. And then there's just all this funny like flavor text that constantly happens every time you do that. Or just some of the weird presentations, like when you encounter Temmie, the weird, like, there's the Temmie village with the weird dogs, but you can also encounter an enemy. And so it's this bullet hell game. And all of a sudden you have this like dog creature with super long legs. And it's just like waddling back and forth. And you're trying like not to bump into its legs. Just so weird. But I love it. Like, I like weird.
Oh yeah, the weirdness is awesome. Like I would like to meet Toby Fox and just say like, how did he come up with some of this stuff? Because wow.
Drugs.
Could be.
He did it all by himself. I mean, you probably had to be on some sort of drugs to stay awake too, just to complete this game. So
to stay awake,
drugs.
And some of the like the wordplay for some of the enemies, like I always have. It's tough to say this just because it's mashing two words, but the Sundari plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, I just say Sunder plane or whatever. Just leave the T out.
Because it's a combination of Sundari, which is like kind of like the brooding, anime archetype, and an airplane, and then you get this brooding airplane, and it's pretty interesting. That's for sure. Any other like enemy encounters or enemy attacks that you thought were notable, or is it just something you think people should just jump in and check out?
I think, without spoiling too much, I think Undyne's was good just because it mixed up. It mixed up the mechanics that you thought you had already gotten used to.
Yeah, you get really comfortable up until that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I found the three most kind of for like the very very end was Papyrus, Undyne, and Muffet or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
had the most like unique battles to them.
I keep forgetting about Muffet's fight too. Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, kind of brings in like almost like a music graph that you move up and down on to dodge enemies, and then it switches into the cupcake monster or whatever.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite fight. Actually, was between Undyne and Muffet's fight. As much of an actual pain in the ass Muffet's fight was, it was enjoyable at the same time. It was one of those ones where, like, if you get hit, you're like, that was my fault. You know?
And that's actually another interesting encounter because there's a way you can completely avoid the counter.
Yeah, by going to the bake sale and spending money on it.
But that's that's way at the beginning of the game. It's nothing you would think of to hold on to, in my opinion.
Yeah, most likely, if it's your first time playing through, you likely use that healing item, or you just threw it in your stash because you're like, what am I going to do with this?
I didn't even buy anything. I was just being cheap.
Well, yeah, you save your money. It's an RPG.
Yeah, because I just
more of those bicycles.
No, just donate all the cats trying to get that platinum.
Oh, sure. So I guess we'll kind of touch on maybe some more of the design presentation. Just so again, we kind of said kind of has a Earthbound aesthetic, very very retro looking.
The closest to Earthbound I could think, as far as comparisons, was just the batshit crazy enemies. Like, like we're talking about the sentient plane and the just two things combined. Just every enemy that comes up, you're like, what the hell is this thing now? So that's where I found the Earthbound. Really, that's when I really started to see it. But there's also other instances that definitely show that the Earthbound influence.
Mm-hmm. I think it ties in with the humor too. Like this game has, it's gonna be hit or miss depending on a person's sense of humor, but it's lots of jokes and gags, and
it goes from not taking itself seriously at all to taking itself super seriously.
Yeah, like
yes, for sure.
A huge turn at the end. But I think that's kind of what really makes the story kind of that's what made it hit for me anyways. Were there any other so lots of dad jokes from Sans and other kind of things is two of the first main characters we meet are the Skeleton Brothers, Sans and Papyrus, and some other aspects of the game that I really enjoyed is that Sans, his text box is in the Sans font, and Papyrus, his text box is in the Papyrus font. Like silly stuff like that.
I could tell when I saw his name that just the look of him that he thought he was a comic, because he starts telling jokes right away. He's trying to be the funny guy. I'm like, I got the pun in his name right away. I was like, nice. Yeah.
And another kind of running joke is if you encountered it in a kind of quote unquote hidden room as the annoying dog.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of like a running gag throughout the game. Just an annoying dog. That moment I thought was great because you find this item and it's like, oh wow, this is gonna be a super special item, and you go to pick it up and it says you're carrying too much dog, and you're like, what? You check your inventory and you have an annoying dog in your inventory, and you drop the annoying dog and it steals the item and runs away, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he shows up later too. Like he starts gnawing on one of Papyrus's bones during his special attack or whatever.
Yep. And in one of the endings too, at the final end screen, if you wait long enough, he'll just show up and go to sleep. Yeah, just trying to think of some of the other enemies we haven't really maybe touched on, like Mettaton, which is a recurring enemy throughout the game. Pretty unique encounters there.
The various TV shows that you barge into, I thought were great. Like going from the cooking show to the news anchor desk to the I'm blanking on the other tropes that they touched on during his fight. But
third one was the essentially the parody of the Final Fantasy VI opera scene.
That's what. Thank you. Yep. Yep.
Like the first time I saw it, I was like, this is brilliant. Just because that scene from Final Fantasy VI for me is a huge moment in gaming history, and here we got
iconic.
Completely making fun of it. Lots of little hidden things throughout the game too. There's one part I missed the first time, not necessarily. I wouldn't say this is a spoiler by any means, but you come across this village kind of in the midpoint of the earlier part of the game, and there's this ghost there, and the ghost is like, you eat, and is like, hey, you want to lay down with me? And you can just lay on the floor, and if you hit a button, you just get back up and go about your business. Did anybody continue to lay on the floor?
No, I did.
I laid on the floor until I got trippy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I laid there for quite a while.
Completely trips out. You got this weird music going, and it turns into space, a picture of like a galaxies and superclusters and stuff. So much random things. Thunder snail race. Like, is anybody able to?
Can you actually beat that? Yeah, that was going to be my question.
I did my first playthrough, and I don't remember how.
So there's a thunder snail race where you can bet on a snail, and there's like, what is it, 4 snails that are racing, or 3, and you have to give it encouragement. And basically, you hit encourage button, like the snail like kind of like pops up a little bit. And in order to win, I think you have to do it like 6 or 7 times. Just encourage it 6 or 7 times, and it'll go slightly faster. But I the first time I played, like, it wasn't working, so I kept hitting the button to keep giving it encouragement, and eventually it flipped over and started on fire because you gave it too much encouragement. Just so much silliness in this game. The instant noodles. Did anybody use the instant noodles during combat by chance?
Those things are a goddamn pain in the ass.
Because of all the items, usually the items you just use it. Where the instant noodles is, okay, well, you got to make the instant noodles, so it like completely stops the battle. Like, the screen doesn't change or anything; it's all text. But it's like, you open the package, you pour it in the water, you got to start boiling the water, and you got to wait for the water to boil. So, you got 3 minutes left. You got 2 minutes left, and just kind of goes through the whole process of making ramen.
Yeah, and then it gives you like the shittiest amount of health back. Gives you like 8 health or something. Like, wow.
Yeah.
After all that, I should be invincible for a couple of turns.
One character we haven't mentioned, and I'm going to bring him up now because I'm remembering something for the first playthrough I did, and maybe you guys can refresh my memory because it didn't happen in my second playthrough. Is Flowery.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear on my first playthrough of this game, you encounter him very early in the game, and he teaches you how the game works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't remember having that on my second playthrough.
It might not do it if it detects a previous playthrough.
Okay, so maybe that's what it was. Because he tells you, he's like, you want to touch everything that's in the screen, and then you touch it and it hurts you. He's telling you the opposite of what you're supposed to do.
See, the first time I did, I didn't. And he was like, all right, let's stop playing around and touch the pellet. And I dodge it again. And he was like, run into the bullet pellets.
Yeah, a great little intro to, as they say, how the game works by trying to tell you, you got this LV abbreviation, which stands for love, and as you fight more enemies, you accumulate more love and experience. You got the EXP, and then he's like, the friendliness pellets, and that's kind of how you figure out, this combat system is going to be a little bit different. I think it does a pretty unique way of kind of throwing you right in there. There's that encounter like right at the beginning, and then the combat dummy or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it does a pretty good job of kind of letting you know something's up. But I think it definitely, if you kind of know like the premise, just the basic premise of the game going into it, I think that helps a lot. I think this is definitely a game I think that people should go into knowing as little as possible.
Yes,
because some of the story moments I think can be surprising. I guess the only other like design wise I wanted to touch on was the theme with saving. For some reason, for me, that just kind of stands out because it's not just traditional save point. Yeah, it's there, but there's always these little encounters, I guess. And you guys want to talk about that bit? What that's about?
Like they actually give it in story justification for saving. Like, I know some other games like Metal Gear Solid where like you're making a record by calling in the radio and stuff like that. But having it as an actual like power, like, you have the ability to save, you can shape the world to have as however you want to by saving and stuff like that. I thought was a good touch and a good way to justify it.
Yeah, and a lot of that really comes into play towards the end of the game. So I think maybe without going too much into spoilers, I don't know. We didn't really say how much we wanted to go into spoilers on that.
I ran into I ran into a really sick instance of it early game where it kind of makes a difference. Going up with the fight against Toriel the first time, I didn't realize that there was a non-lethal way to get past it. I was like, oh wow, she really wants me to fight her. I guess I have to fight her. And I fought her and I killed her and I felt horrible. And so I decided to reload my previous save, go through the whole dialogue again, and then I managed to save her. And then I got to Flowey after that. Flowey goes on and says, listen, you're not the only person who knows how to save around here. I know what you did. You killed her. You're not going to be able to wipe that away. Stuff like that. And I was like, oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. That for the new player, like that's when you really, really know that, your actions have consequences because
right.
Especially with that fight, because you keep doing the mercy and nothing changes, and you have to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. It's a game that's like it makes it really easy for you to just attack and take the easy route. Like it's a game that going the pacifist route, it makes you work for it in particular, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So, and kind of like one of the I guess memes or from the game is the with saving, every save spot will have like a flavor text. You come up to a spot and there is a piece of cheese on a table, and it's like, oh, there's a piece of cheese stuck to the table, and you see a little mouse hole, and it's like, well, and then you go to save and it says, the thought of that mouse someday getting that cheese fills you with determination, and it keeps getting more and more. There's the frozen spaghetti that Papyrus leaves. It's like, and then again, there's the mouse hole. I thought that was kind of cute. So, do we want to kind of talk about the story a little bit? Like, what? Maybe this is something we should have kind of jumped into earlier, but I thought maybe it would be a little bit better to kind of give the story its section after kind of explaining the basics of the game. So what's the gist of the story without going too much into the end game spoilers? Feel free to just jump in.
Yeah, like you're a kid, you're walking along, you fall into a pit underground, you find a bunch of monsters, and you find out that years and years ago, monsters and humans both were on the earth. They fought. The humans forced the monsters underground and sealed them away with a magical barrier, and they've been clinging on to hope that they would be able to one day get past the barrier, and you find out that you are part of the key to help them do that.
Yeah,
and you also find out you're not the first kid to fall down there.
Also true.
Yeah, it's a real... This game's tough when talking about the story because like spoilers can I think can take so much away.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe I had a little bit here on story. I thought we could talk about the gist, but I mean, if you go much more into it,
it's pretty shallow if you don't talk about any of the story points. So
it is like it's definitely a story. I think it's a great story. That you'll just have to take our words for it. Jason, maybe take his word for it. Maybe you won't like the story. He didn't like the story too much.
Well, going into this, I heard there was a very divisive game, but I try to keep an open mind. And like I said, I didn't completely hate it, but there was elements I liked. I found the different areas, the whole world itself was pretty cool. And the music went perfect with each area it went to. The music, honestly, was the best part for me.
Music was amazing.
It's I love the game, and the music is the best part for me too. It's just phenomenal.
Trying to think if there's anything story-wise else we can really say without spoiling too much. I thought about this before. I'd previously done a review myself, and
most people, do they listen to this, they usually wait until they
played it before they listen.
Yeah.
Some people don't care.
Well, I don't know that they don't care. I think they're expecting spoilers then.
There's a lot to talk about, like, because the game seems very superficial for a large part of it, and then you start kind of get an inkling that there's a little something more to it, and then by the time you get to the initial ending, is one of the things that I'm becoming pretty irritated by when game developers do these kind of faux endings where they'll give you an ending, and I think Undertale is a little bit different because it tells you. I mean, they straight up tell you, hey, you get the encounter with Flowey, and he's like, keep going, maybe there's something else to do. I can see a lot of people stopping, and I think, Hodge, you said the first time you played, that's kind of where you stopped, wasn't it?
So yeah, for this playthrough, it was kind of weird because I got to the final fight with
Asgore.
Yeah, I fought Asgore 3 times and beat him every time. And every time Flowery, like you said, would be like, okay, no, we're not done yet. And then I'd reload the game. And I expected that I would have to fight Flowery because I remember fighting him in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But because this was the pacifist route, I guess I didn't have to this time. And that's when I realized there was the other steps where I had to go back into town and I had to go to Elfie's laboratory to finish some stuff there that I hadn't done. And once I did that, then everything kind of continued on. But it was kind of banging my head against the wall. And that's why I reached out to you guys going, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Because I'm at the point here. I figured I was close to the end, and sure enough, I wasn't.
Yeah, there was quite a bit after the ending, and I know, Church, you and I have discussed this quite a few times on the Game Times podcast that we really hate the faux endings because a lot of people will just be like, I've seen enough, even if they do know there's more.
I saw credits.
Like near Automata. Gravity Rush, a couple other games. Yeah, that's what I said first. And a lot of people, just, I'm good enough. That counts as a beat or something. Or it didn't really grip me. I'm done with it. Like, cool. You actually, in Nier's case, you've played like a quarter of the game. Hooray for you. So
yeah, and that's why it bothers me. Like, usually I will check out post-game content on a game if it allows me to keep going. I'll just kind of go around and see what's up. But in a lot of cases, I find that it's a little more obvious with a few of these games that there's a little bit more. If you just do that like next step, then they're like, oh hey, there's this whole other thing to do.
Yeah, I kind of approach it like Marvel movies now, where I just kind of look it up like, am I done? Okay, cool, I'm done. There's nothing after the credits? Cool.
And there's a difference between games like Nier Automata and like Halo, where it's like, oh, well, if you do it on Legendary with all the skulls, you get a cutscene 30 seconds longer than the regular one you would get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Where this one, it's like the whole final act of the game is like, that's where like everything comes to a head. You get all the background of the story, why everything happened the way it did. Like, oh yeah,
that's where the game gets serious and stops goofing around.
It gets
honestly, like it's just a goofy game up until then. And we're like, oh yeah, this guy's kind of evil. Everyone else is just kind of like a lackey, sort of, or just some character you meet along the way. And you're like, oh cool, he's the big bad. Then you fight him, thinking, okay, I'll be done after this. And then shit actually gets real pretty much when you reload it.
Yeah, and I think that's an aspect that some people might struggle with too, is kind of the, maybe not so much the gameplay, but the people looking for the big story hooks. That it, as I said before, it's kind of light and goofy and superficial.
Yeah, I honestly
didn't amount of hours, and then all of a sudden, then it's like, That's kind of where you're like, oh no, play the game for like 10 hours and then it gets good. Which I never like saying that, because even like slow games, slow beginnings, for me, I enjoy them.
Burn. Yeah. I don't like a mid-game burn, honestly. When a game starts awesome, and then it feels like a slow burn, like it's just padding itself out. I absolutely
Honestly, I felt a little bit like that from the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely some of like the mid-game side questing can drag things out a little bit.
And that I felt like at least it was brief. Like nothing felt like it took too long to do in that. But as far as like this goes, yeah, I didn't care about the story at all, honestly, until I got to the end and started it up again after that. Then I started being like, oh, interesting. Like honestly, it didn't grip me at all until then. And then I started thinking like, oh, whoa, what's going on here?
They gave their characters depth. What is happening?
Yeah.
It also helps that it's not a long game.
Yes, yeah, you can finish Undertale in what, 10 to 12 hours or so, depending.
Yeah.
Under that it was like 6, I think 3, 7. Maybe.
Crush it like Jason does.
I wasn't even trying to be a humble brag. I just don't think it's
we got our I always forget what the phrase is. The in-house poly killer. Resident poly killer. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, so we kind of mentioned the music, and I definitely want to talk about the music. That game is developed by single person Toby Fox, and he also did all the music for this game. And he does have a background in composing. He used to do the music for an online comic series called Homestuck, which I'm not too familiar with myself. But yeah, would you guys? So everyone kind of said the music's pretty good.
You can tell that he's in his element there.
Yeah, it was clear it wasn't his first rodeo as far as music. I'm a big sucker for chiptunes, so as long as it's somewhat interesting, I'm gonna love it, and this knocks it out of the park, music-wise.
I honestly did not know that he was involved with Homestuck. And it kind of makes sense because it's got the same kind of like fan base where you're like, do I really want to get involved with this game? Like it's a whole Rick and Morty thing, you know?
Yes. Undertale community definitely didn't do itself any service those first like year or so. Or even still now, they can be very, very pushy about their thoughts on this game. But I think there's a couple songs from Homestuck that kind of like slightly got remixed or remade for this game. But yeah, if nothing else, if you have no interest, if somebody doesn't have any interest in playing this game and you like chiptunes or retro music, definitely check out the soundtrack. Like, great variety. Does a awesome blend of the chiptunes. He throws in some electronic elements and orchestral arrangements, not traditional instruments, but
yeah, like MIDI instruments.
It's so good. I own mostly intentional 3 copies physically of the soundtrack. Initially, I bought it on vinyl because why not? They're doing all these neat vinyl releases of retro game soundtracks, and then because I don't listen to records myself, I don't have a record player. I end up buying the CD version of the soundtrack, and then also got a copy of the soundtrack with the collector's edition. And I'm more than happy to have 3 copies of the soundtrack. For me, this is like top 5 game soundtracks of all time. Super good.
I'd
go ahead.
There. No, I was agreeing with you.
I was gonna say, any particular songs that really stood out to each of you?
I think my 2 favorites were Asgore's battle song. So I don't even want to try to pronounce the actual track title. It's like Bergen Truckgung, or I don't know. It sounds German. Yeah. And then I also like the Papyrus Bone
Truzzle.
Yeah, those were my 2 favorites.
I don't have a particular favorite. So like I said, that was my favorite aspect of the game. So everything fit the theme it needed to. It really made some of the areas you go into, even if it's more like ominous, barely any sound to it in a couple areas, even that can, that can flesh it out a lot more, make it feel more real.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Mauser? Any particular songs?
Yeah, Bone Truzzle for sure. And then the Genocide Undying Fight has got a phenomenal song. That's easily one of my favorites.
Yeah, and there's basically it's that and then Megalovania, which are 2 songs that you can only hear during the Genocide route. For me personally, I've not from when I first played the game up until now, I've never really understood the love for Megalovania. Like, it's a cool song, but like almost every other song in the game, I prefer over that song. So I'm not sure why the community is so latched on to that one. Because like, you look,
I think it's just the boss fight song to ever fight. Like, I don't know. It's like,
it's true. And just kind of a side note is I don't remember the exact place, but if you Google it, there's somebody who essentially like made that Sans fight from the Genocide run, and they did it in a browser version, so you can just play that fight.
Oh, cool! Very cool.
Yeah,
all right. Get some practice in.
Yeah, it is insane. It is. I mean, technically, you're not intended to be able to beat that fight, and there's a pretty interesting outcome with that encounter. But again, that's kind of a spoiler thing. But music, yeah, for me, there's like I said, I absolutely love the soundtrack. There's so many songs. The Asgore, Bone Trussel, I forget the Metatons. It's like Meat Grinder.
Yep.
Which is one of the earlier tracks. Like even some of the areas. One that really kind of shifted the mood of the game, like pretty extreme early on, was when you get to the waterfall area, and it's kind of like that chimey bell song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's just this like super chill, ominous, kind of like haunting song, and the soundtrack has to be heard to believe it. It's so good. And then for me, especially with video games, the knowing kind of like the story implications or the character implications for the songs, like elevate them so much more. Like I can listen to a soundtrack and basically relive playing a game, which I think is part of the reason why I love video game soundtracks as much as I do.
100%.
So I guess as we kind of move on here before we wrap things up, I wanted to check to see if you guys had any other thoughts or things you just wanted to mention that you enjoyed about the game, or do you think we covered everything pretty well?
Maybe just to go back to my playthrough. So And maybe this will be semi-spoiler. I don't know. But anyways, I think we've kind of said spoilers are somewhat okay.
Sure.
So I played through as a pacifist mode, and I got to the end. And normally, what would happen is is Flowery would come out, and it would kind of stop the battle, right? And he forces you to reload, and then you're supposed to fight him. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you fight him for the pacifist fight, though?
No.
No. Okay. So that's correct. I'm not supposed to fight him for that fight.
You're not supposed to fight at all if you're pacifist.
Okay. Well, that's a fight we didn't talk about, that when you play through the neutral fight, you still fight him, because I did fight him in the past, and that is one bizarre
Oh my
fight.
God. Yeah.
Like it just throws everything at you on the screen. It's just bright colored and weirdness the whole way. Like, oh my.
Yeah, pure madness. And
I got insta killed just because I was sitting there like, what the hell am I looking at?
yeah, for sure. It's wild stuff.
Yeah, when it changes the graphical style and everything just to some kind of weird early 90s MTV.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it.
Or like some kind of white zombie video or something.
Yeah. And that's like where like a lot of the and there's a lot of kind of like fourth wall breaking throughout the game, not too extreme, but like there's elements of the game that acknowledges like us as the player, and that I think it's fascinating how it's all presented. And
it tries to be pretty meta. It kind of reminded me of, like, to keep mentioning Metal Gear Solid's kind of weird, but kind of like with Metal Gear Solid 1 when you're fighting name's escaping me right now.
The Psycho Mantis?
Psycho Mantis fight, yeah. Like,
Yes.
It just seemed like it was trying to pull that kind of shit, and I thought that was pretty interesting too.
See, actually, I don't know what it does for the Switch or the PS4 version, but the PC version, if you die during that fight, the game quits and you have to restart the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
and it's saved. It has a save point from the beginning of that fight and all that, but yeah, it just closes the game altogether.
yeah,
When you win, it doesn't do the crash thing that it does for the
PC
for the PC version. It just kind of goes like full white screen
and
for a minute,
Okay.
and then it comes back. It almost looks like it freezes, and then it comes back.
Oh, nice.
Another thing I wanted to mention, we've talked about it. I will try to sell anybody on this game if I can. But one thing that I find very, very interesting about this game is some of its ratings on Steam. You know, the PC game distribution service. It has its own rating system, and the internet can be rough sometimes. You know, review bombing. People will downvote games for the most arbitrary of reasons, and especially this game kind of gets a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a meme game, which I disagree with, but I kind of get that when people say that. But on Steam itself, which games with problems get judged harshly, but on Steam, Undertale is 96%. Overwhelmingly positive, which I think is massively telling. That was one of the things that really got me to check out Undertale, because it was about a year before I played it myself, and I just couldn't get past that rating, because like Steam can be brutal. People are not nice on the internet when it comes to reviewing games.
I'm kind of impressed that Toby Fox hasn't done anything in a year to piss those reviewers off.
Right. And also on Metacritic, it has a 92 still. Like, this is 5 years later. Like,
That's kind of why I don't really give a shit about anybody reviewing anything at all whatsoever. If I see a thing and it looks interesting, I'm going to try it out either way. Someone could be like, this game is complete garbage, and I'll be like, oh, still looks good. I'm going to try it out. If I went by reviews, I would have missed out on some of my favorite games that I've ever played.
Agreed.
Because there's always that salty guy that if you catch the salty person who just sucked at a game or played it for 10 minutes and wanted to be the first to review it, you're going to miss out.
True.
You know, I'll sometimes I'll watch a review or like a before you buy or one of those things and take those things into consideration. But mostly if I wanted, if I'm interested in a game, I'll look at some gameplay and be like, that looks fun to play. And I'll go by that. I don't go by what the community says. I'll go more by what a friend of mine says.
Sure.
And I might not always agree, but they know more about what I like or would like than some random person on a website who's paid. Some people, not everyone who does reviews is paid, but you know, the big reviewers that are paid to do it, you're like, they're so jaded from having to play games. This might not even be their style of game. So they gut it. So that's why I never really put a lot of stock in anybody's review of anything.
Yeah.
Even if I watch it, I won't. I'm basically more watching it to see the gameplay they put in the video.
It's very hard to find a game that you don't get some sort of enjoyment out of either. Like Jason, you said you didn't really care for Undertale, but you at least like you got enjoyment out of the music and all that stuff. Like at least
there's elements like just even like a movie that's shitty. I can compartmentalize and like, oh, I liked this part. You know, like easiest target is the new Star Wars movies. Like a lot of them are not good, but I can enjoy elements of them. Especially if they're like a sequel to something I do like. Like I realize that some movies are just garbage or something, like some of the Terminator sequels. But as much as I like Terminator, I'm still going to derive some enjoyment out of it. So that's the way I approach video games too. I go into everything with a fresh mind, you know, even if it's a series I'm a fan of, and just kind of, okay, well, I liked this part, so it wasn't a total loss. You know, I try to find the good in things, even if I don't like them. If I really don't think I'll like something, I won't even bother trying it. And, you know, sometimes things can sway you in the end. Like, there's been a bunch of movies where I've been like, this is boring. And then it all comes together at the end, and you're like, wow, actually, that was a really good movie now that I have seen the whole thing. You know, like a lot of people that review things don't even bother finishing the thing. They're like, oh, the first 2 levels, I've experienced it all. And then they just, you know, you can tell some people when you see the reviews, like, they didn't even play it all. What are they talking about? You know, they'll rip on something, and you'll be like, well, clearly he hasn't played the 3rd level because that's all explained and stuff like that. So that's why. Yeah. I'm a big proponent for play it yourself and judge it yourself. Don't just.
You heard it.
The more you hear other people's opinions, the more they'll skew your own opinion and being like, oh yeah, that guy was right, and you'll like automatically like notice that more. That's the way I like to approach things in general.
Church is hosted and Jason's preaching.
Indeed. And mentioning sequels, there is actually a follow-up to Undertale. Not exactly a sequel, or at least at this point, it's not a sequel. There is a game that is available for free on, I believe, on all platforms. It's called Deltarune, which is an anagram for Undertale. And it is basically kind of the next step in this formula. It's part 1, so it's not a full game, but it's a good few hours, and it's a lot of the same characters, but again, it's a different universe. So the characters are there, but they're like the personalities are intact, but it's not connected to Undertale as far as we know.
It's a multiverse.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they make those connections.
And there is some potential very interesting meta sort of connotations and possible connections that we'll just have to see how they all pan out. But I would definitely recommend checking out Deltarune. They take a different angle with the gameplay, more of a traditional style JRPG, but still, again, kind of mixing things up. Again, killer soundtrack for Deltarune. And the rest of the game, or the next part, no date. It took him 5 years or so, or I forget exactly how long, to do the first part of Deltarune by himself. And he said that he didn't want to make this a game that took another 10 years to finish. So he actually was assembling a team. So hopefully we'll see something from that in the near future. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed Undertale, I would definitely recommend checking out Deltarune, which is available for free. Have any of you checked out Deltarune?
Yeah. And just like you said, like, great story, baller soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's one I haven't touched yet, but I definitely will.
I might not.
Fair enough. So then I wanted to jump into some community impressions again for anybody who wants to play along with Prime. You can use the hashtag play along with Prime when you start a game, playing a game, or complete a game. And a lot of times we can pull some of those comments and share them here. So let's do it. First up, we got a comment from Analyst Duelist on Twitter. Only played it for the first time this year. A clever and charming game that found ways to surprise, entertain, and to make one laugh and think. Amazing soundtrack. Then we have It's Rocket Sauce. Undertale is very misleading. While it's not graphically impressive, it has a beautiful story. It looks easy, but there are some very challenging boss fights. I don't think this game was for me at the beginning, but here I am, continuing on past the first credits. And I will mention that I got this before he finished the game, and I actually didn't see any further comment. So that's great that it continued on. And then lastly, this wasn't an official like play along with Prime or like just beat it or something, but pulled this from the Cartridge Club forums. Caleb J. Ross at Caleb J. Ross says, my first playthrough back when the game was released was pretty much a kill everything run. I got to the final boss and couldn't beat it. A recent playthrough, I did a pacifist run, much easier and much more satisfying. So thank you very much for those comments, and hope to see more people playing along with Prime when you can. And then as we kind of wrap things up here, I would like to give you all a chance to plug your social medias or YouTube. So let's go ahead and just go down the list here. Let people know how they can get a hold of you on the socials.
I guess I'm first. I'm on Twitter, NintendoHodge, and YouTube, NintendoHodge. I'm trying to put out content. Normally I'll be doing yard sales, but with everything kind of shut down, it's a little tough right now. But I have put up a little bit of content recently. So yeah, those are the two places you can find me.
And I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Corpse Flood Gaming. I also do the Game Tenants podcast with Church and the Super Enabler Bros podcast on my own channel with Chris, the old ass retro gamer. It's a lot of fun. So if you want to just come hang out sometime, come check it out.
Cool. And I'm MauserTV on Twitter and Twitch. And I'm a part of the Winter Ion Game Studios YouTube channel on YouTube. So a lot of good playthroughs and informative and scholastic content for gaming as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And then if anybody would like to get a hold of me or whatnot, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you look up the Game Grinder, you will find me there.
Rather not.
Or not. That's fine. I have no hard feelings here. So
do check it out.
So that is going to do it for this episode of Cartridge Club Prime for May 2020. The CC Prime game for June is Gears of War, which is available via Xbox, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Windows, and iOS. I didn't know there was an iOS port of that, but it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
They booked me on the wrong gig. I've already beat it. Today's the first, and I already plowed through it earlier today. Love it.
Then there's also the Cartridge Club Portable, and for June it'll be Portable Mania, which is basically play any portable game and share your thoughts. And Curtis will talk about those games on the subsequent podcast. And then last but not least is the PC-focused Quick Save Club, who will be covering Antichamber as their game of the month for June and July, because they're doing 2 months per game. So then, to those of you interested in supporting the club beyond a review on the podcast app of your choice, I'd like to mention that the club is entirely funded by pledges made from members of our community. We are extremely grateful to those supporters, and if you're interested in becoming one of them, please look into how you can do that at patreon.com/Cartridge Club. With that said, we look forward to hearing from you soon. CC Unite!